You were supposed to be dead, Sigrid told the village hall with a porcelain smile and a burned coat in her hands. We buried her, we closed the book. She said it like a fact, she said it like a finality. I stood in the back, sleeves muddy from morning work, and felt the room shift as if I had become a rumour. That day they proved my death with someone else's embers, and everyone believed what they were told. This is how I returned. My name is Elena Voss. I am a young lady who cares deeply about my family and my community. I run my thumb along the iron gate where my name used to be scratched into the paint. The ranch smells of hay and rain, the kind of honest scent that tells you where you belong even when you've been told otherwise. I haven't been back in 5 years. People call the place ours, but the truth is always more particular. I come quietly, because I learned long ago that things left quietly sometimes stay longer. Sigrid is standing under the sycamore when I step into the yard as if I had a right to arrive. She looks the same, too pale, too polished, but the smile she keeps for neighbours does not reach her eyes when she sees me. Bram's shadow flattens behind her like a stamp. She says nothing. The air waits like it knows when an accident begins. My boots leave prints in the wet grass. The ranch feels smaller than I remember, or maybe I've grown larger in absence. Some gates are left open for the dead to cross. I walked in anyway. At the council, villagers clap and offer sympathy. Sigrid holds a jacket with a ragged sleeve, my jacket, she says, found near the ravine. Everyone nods because stories that fit the town's template are easier to swallow. I remember that jacket. It had a river stain from spring 3 years ago. I had thought I lost it while mending a fence. They used it as a prop for the narrative they built around my disappearance. The burn marks look fresh, deliberate. Someone held a match to fabric and called it evidence. I sit silent in the back row. Quiet is not a weakness, it's a ledger. I memorize faces, the ones that glance at me like I am a problem that must be explained away. Mrs. Kohler avoids my eyes. Mr. Strand shifts in his seat. They know something is wrong, but comfort is easier than confrontation. Later, someone will tell me they never meant for things to go this far. For now, they meant it. They meant every word of the lie they swallowed. They burn what they cannot name, then call the smoke evidence. I was left to walk off an argument after a night of heavy rain and a banged elbow that felt like a fracture. Someone drove off without me. The headlights disappeared down the dirt road, and I stood there in the cold, wondering if they would come back. They didn't. The story to the outside world is a missing daughter. The inside story is a decision made over a bottle, a map folded into a pocket, and a phone with no signal. I found shelter with a farmer named Old Caspar who fed me stew and taught me how to mend hooves. But the world I'd left behind rearranged itself without me, so smoothly it felt rehearsed. It's the small details that sting, the changed locks, the altered keys, the nameplates swapped. People like my family can schedule erasure like a train timetable. They divided my possessions before my body was cold, except I wasn't dead. I was walking through fields, learning to survive on kindness and stubbornness. Every day I spent away, they built their new reality brick by brick. An accident is only an accident until someone signs the paperwork. They took the tack room first, or rather, they sold the best horse and called it settling old debts. Mech grinned in a way that belongs on posters that sell ease. They called the auction urgent, and the purchaser was a man from the next county with a limp handshake and money that didn't ask questions. I watched from a distance as the sign changed, the placard twisted, my inheritance recited in a voice that made it law. The mare's name was Stella. She knew my whistle. When they loaded her into the trailer, she looked back toward the barn as if searching for me. I had no paper to prove anything. I had muscle memory, calluses that named each nail in the barn. That memory was not currency to them. I learned how to feel the theft in my bones. It aches differently than humiliation. It is an emptiness you can't speak around. Every item they sold was a piece of my life reduced to a price tag and a handshake. They auctioned my memories and bought themselves confidence. Rumours bloom like blackberries in this town. Someone said I'd left because I wasn't well. Someone else said I'd been taken by a wandering man. The village helps the easiest story because it does not want to bother with complexity. Truth requires effort. Lies require only repetition. Anya, the shopkeeper, gave me bread in the dark one evening when I returned and slipped a note. Be careful. They have paperwork. That scrap of paper felt like a stone in my pocket. Useless, but proof that someone else knew the river of lies had current. I learned to read people like weather. A stiff wind means gossip, an overcast day means silence. If you can read the air, you can guess where the storm is waiting. Some people looked at me with pity, others with suspicion. a few with something that looked like guilt but never quite reached their mouths. The town had chosen its story, and I was the ghost that didn't fit the script. A town will tell the story it can afford. Tova H. Jelm, who grazes cattle 3 fields over, knows the truth without speaking it. She sees what others soften. Her hands are walnut-scarred and patient. She offers me work that pays in shelter, not money. Tova's kindness is a stitch, a small, practical mending of what the family ripped. She does not ask for confessions. She hands me tools and says, "The fence needs mending," as if that were enough explanation for everything. In the dark of early morning, while the ranch breathes and the sky is thin, I make a list in my head: names, dates, injuries, debts. Not paper, memory. I file everything so the present becomes a ledger of what can't be taken again. I remember the day Bram looked at me and said, "You're too emotional for business." I remember Sigrid's laugh when I suggested improvements to the ranch. I remember Mek calling me the spare. Every slight, every dismissal, every moment they made me feel small, I catalogue it all. A quiet neighbour sometimes keeps louder proofs than any paper. They invited the village to celebrate Mek's engagement on the date I should have come home. My acceptance letter to an agricultural program sat unread on a shelf in a friend's house, the envelope gathering dust. I learned of the engagement when someone put a photo of Mek with his fiancée in my path and told me it was my fault I missed it, as if I had chosen to be erased. Sigrid's toast praised sacrifice. Bram's eyes were damp with pride. They spoke my absence into permanence, transformed my disappearance into a convenient narrative about moving on and healing. I felt like a ghost in a photo album, the margin they cropped. The celebration was held in the barn I used to clean, under lights I used to hang for Christmas. They danced on the floor I used to sweep. I left quietly that night and folded my hurt into a plan rather than into a plea. Grief can be a fuel if you know how to refine it. They framed my absence and hung it like a masterpiece. Isla at the town office keeps a stack of papers in a drawer people forget to open. She is methodical, quiet, the kind of person who notices when things don't add up. Years earlier, a misfiled compensation claim meant for loss of property was routed through a clerk who liked to drink tea and forget the names of petitioners who were inconvenient. I had no idea the bureaucracy could be an ally. I learned later that Hendrik, our family lawyer, had been in 2 places at once on purpose, signing documents in different offices on the same afternoon. Small errors begin to feel like lanterns in the dark. They burn steady if someone refuses to keep them secret. Isla shows me a photocopy one afternoon, sliding it across her desk without a word. The signature is Hendrik's, but the date is impossible. He was at a funeral that day. I remember because everyone talked about it. Yet here he is, supposedly signing away my rights in an office 2 towns over. Paper is only silence until a hand uncovers it. Gustav the vet fixed more than a lame horse when he pulled me from a ditch and bandaged a leg that the cold weather had nearly taken. He didn't ask why I had no identification. He asked context-free questions and gave practical answers. In return, he gave me a place to sleep for a week and a job watching foals. People like Gustav are small safety nets sewn into the countryside. He talks to animals better than people, his voice low and steady. He teaches me patience by example. His mention of the burned jacket. "Sigrid showed me that coat once," he said, tasting the words became a pebble I pocket and keep. "She wanted to know if fire damage could be dated," he adds. I told her I wasn't that kind of expert. He looks at me then and I see the question he won't ask. I don't answer it, not yet, but I file it away with everything else. Evidence accumulates slowly like snow. Some strangers are gentle with the broken parts we think we must hide. An afternoon of scrubbing stalls yields a neighbour's loose remark. Bram once bragged about closing the file on family matters. It's the kind of boast men make when they feel the world owes them tidiness. The phrasing put a shiver under my skin. A file is not concrete, but it hints at someone who thinks in boxes, someone who can make an absence legal. The neighbour, old Henrik, tells me this while leaning on a fence post, his eyes distant. "Thought it was strange at the time," he says. But who questions a grieving father? Now the ledger I carry is not paper but sound bites, phrases spoken by greedy mouths. I collect them like seeds. Each one is small, seemingly meaningless on its own, but together they form a pattern, a constellation of carelessness. Bram talked too much. Sigrid performed too well. Mek celebrated too quickly. Their confidence became their weakness. Words are small tools with heavy teeth. They excavate truth if you listen. Reuben runs the auction that takes our tack and a few old photos. He is blithe, believing he moves only objects. When Mek waves away an heirloom saddle and jokes about closing the farm, the buyer laughs and pats his hand. The man who bought the mare paid in coin and a smile that means no questions asked. But he failed to notice the mare's brand, my brand, and scribbled the wrong name on the bill of sale. A small error. In a town where every signature is a believing gesture, an error is a crack. I start cataloguing their mistakes in my head like a hoarder of cracks. A crack is a place where light can reach. The buyer's invoice lists Stella Vosbram, but the registration papers still say Stella A. Voss. The middle initial is mine, Elena. It's a tiny discrepancy, but it means the sale isn't clean. It means someone could challenge it. It means the door isn't fully closed. They valued my things like trash. They miscounted the cracks. At a harvest fair, Sigrid gives another speech, this time about courage and moving forward. The village accepts the narrative because it simplifies grief. Those who knew things differently either moved away or let sleep take them. I watch from a barn loft where dust hangs like film over truth. A child, curious, slips me a bracelet she found near the ravine, a small knot of thread I once wore while mending fences. It's a ridiculous, tiny object until it isn't. I study the knot like an archaeologist of my own life. The child's name is Myra. She has dark eyes and asks too many questions. Why were you hiding? She asks. I tell her I wasn't hiding, just watching. Same thing, she says with the wisdom of the very young. She tells me she doesn't believe the story about the ravine. My papa says the jacket looked too new, she whispers. Children see what adults train themselves to ignore. Small objects have memory in rural places. People forget that. Hendrik is polished. He signs things so they look ordained. I confront him once in a pub, asking about the transfer of the estate. He smiles in a way lawyers do, like someone who can efface trouble. He mentions an old regulation that lets families claim land unused for a period. He explains the language of forms as if it were scripture. I understand then that law without conscience is a tool for those who can afford the time to make it work for them. He speaks in paragraphs, each sentence designed to confuse. He leaves traces in his confidence. He is careful but not careful enough. When I ask about the compensation claim, his eye twitches, just once, just enough. He changes the subject quickly, talking about property taxes and inheritance law, but I've already seen what I needed to see. He knows there's a problem. He's just hopping no one else notices. A pen can be a blade when sharpened by greed. I return for the first night and sleep in the hay loft. The house creaks like a tired thing. I watch Mek leave for the town with a coat that used to be mine, and Sigrid straighten the photograph frames as if arranged grief is easier to maintain than truth. They have made a stage, the audience believes. I watch them from the shadows and feel the ancient, patient fury of the land in my bones. This place knows me. The wood, the stone, the soil, they remember my hands. I do not reveal myself. I will not be the raw, begging figure in their theatre. Instead, I place a small mark, my secret sign, on the post where I used to tie up the mare. It is childish but useful, a breadcrumb for the times I will return to check. 3 scratches in the shape of an barely visible unless you know to look. The land keeps score even when people forget. A mark is a promise not to forget. Anya finds a receipt in a hat returned to her shop. It shows a wire transfer with an unfamiliar account number. She doesn't know its significance, but she remembers faces and routes and slips me her suspicion. She gives me time and small truths. Who visited the bank, who wrote the check, who took the money that used to be mine. The town's sloppiness, convenience mixed with arrogance, becomes my resource. She keeps a notebook behind the counter where she records transactions. Old habit from accounting school, she says. The people who help me speak in fragments. I put those fragments together like a mosaic. Anya gives me a name. Gustav gives me a date. Tova gives me a motive. Old Henrik gives me a phrase. Slowly the picture emerges. Not all at once, but piece by piece, like morning light filling a room. I learn to be patient. I learn to trust the slow accumulation of truth. A broken ledger can be glued by patient hands. I find a scrap of paper in the hay, a form Mek must have dropped. It has an account number and an initial. It's not a full file, but it is a thread. I carry it to Tova and then to Gustav. We form a permissionless coalition, a vet, a neighbour, and a woman with mud under her nails. We brainstorm how to make the thread matter without a lawyer's letterhead. Tova has a friend in the county office. Gustav knows an accountant. I know how to wait. Clues in the countryside are like seeds. They take root slowly and then push through with surprising persistence. We meet in Tova's kitchen on Sunday evenings, spreading papers across the table like a puzzle. We don't have all the pieces yet, but we have enough to see the shape of what's missing. And that's often all you need, the outline of an absence. A scrap is never worthless if you know which route to water. At a harvest festival years later, a journalist, Seraphine Moa, arrives looking for human interest. I see her eyes slide over the staged grief and find curiosity in the seams. She asks about a burned coat and then about a jacket that looked less burned than staged. She is not an ally yet. Journalists are hungry things, but she watches. When Sigrid's mask slides in public, an off-handed cruelty to a vendor, Seraphine notes the detail in a notebook. Her pen moves quickly, precisely. People like Seraphine turn small wrongs into questions. Questions will want answers. She interviews Bram for a piece about rural family businesses. She asks him about succession planning. He stumbles over the timeline, contradicts himself twice. She smiles and writes it all down. Later she finds me at Tova's farm. I think there's a story here, she says, but I need your permission to tell it. A curious pen can erode a practiced lie. Mek gets drunk and brags to an unreliable friend about how easy it was to claim the compensation. The friend, thinking it a tall tale, sells the story to a man who sells stories for a living. That man tells Seraphine, who files it under possible lead. Meanwhile, Hendrik misses a signature at the bank, a line on a form that would later show double withdrawal. Little cracks are multiplying. I sit with my list and feel an anticipation that is almost guilty at its own pleasure. A betrayal does not need malice to break you. Sometimes it needs mere thoughtlessness. Mek didn't mean to confess. He just wanted to impress someone with how clever he'd been. Hendrik didn't mean to make a mistake. He just signed too many forms too quickly. Sigrid didn't mean to be cruel to the vendor. She just forgot to perform for a moment. Their facades are crumbling not from external pressure but from internal rot. Arrogance is the economy of small mistakes. Dimitri, the bank clerk, notices a duplicate payment flagged by the ledger software. Someone paid a compensation twice, then reversed one. He is bored, but bored men sometimes keep notes out of habit. He keeps the note. Later, when the story becomes noisy, that note becomes the squeak that makes an inspector turn his head. I dine on the chance that their carelessness will be my defense. Dimitri shows the note to his supervisor, who shows it to the regional manager, who calls the government office. I am patient as the seasons. Evidence comes slow in a countryside place where everything is supposed to be eternal. But I've learned that even stone wears down under enough water, even steel rusts, even lies collapse under their own weight. I wait and watch and collect. The world turns slowly here, but it turns. Proof arrives on the solace of small mistakes. I sit with Tova under the low light of her kitchen, and we map everything: dates, debts, auctions. We rehearse asking for an official look into past claims. Tova's husband grumbles about interfering, but she is steady. I begin to feel a pattern like an embroidery. Someone's greed stitched over a missing person, a legal form that acts like a needle through cloth. We create a timeline on her kitchen wall using string and index cards. It looks like something from a detective show, but it works. We decide on small public moves, write a letter to the council, speak to Anya, nudge the clerk. It is a quiet diplomacy, no lawyer, no cameras, only a network of people who remember differently. We send the first letter unsigned, just questions, just inconsistencies pointed out politely. The goal isn't to accuse yet. The goal is to make them nervous, to make them wonder who knows what. Justice begins with a kitchen table and cups of tea. Inspector Lind reopens a file because a journalist keeps asking. He is slow, procedural. He asks for names, for recollections. He asks Isla to pull documents. They call Bram in as a courtesy. Bram's answers shrug like a coat he wants to take off. The family's story blanches under even cursory questioning. Hendrik grows thin-lipped. Sigrid's composure cracks just slightly when asked about the jacket. I found it, she says, near the ravine, but she can't remember which day. Or who she was with, or why she kept it for weeks before reporting it. Their uneasy faces are the first music in a score I have been composing with patience. It is not revenge yet. It is the sound of a system that can be nudged. Inspector Lind is thorough. He doesn't like loose ends. And this case, he realizes, is nothing but loose ends. He starts pulling threads. Even the slowest engine can change direction when enough hands steer. The bank freezes an account after Dimitri's note becomes evidence of misdirected funds. The government sends a terse letter asking for clarification about a compensation claim. Why was it reopened, and who authorized the transfer? Mek's bought assets are held in limbo. The auction company receives a call that unsells the sale for investigation. The first legal knife is gentle but precise. The mayor is returned to a holding facility. The tack room items are catalogued as disputed property. They scramble in their little gatherings, hastily trying to knit new lies. Sigrid's smile falters in public. Bram looks like a man who has realized the cupboard will not open. Mek hires a lawyer, but the lawyer asks questions Mek can't answer cleanly. Where is the death certificate? Where is the probate file? Where is the proof of abandonment? The paperwork they relied on starts to look suspiciously thin. A freeze is a winter for money. It makes fortunes think. Seraphine publishes a piece, small, careful, with quotes from a clerk who remembered a misfile and a neighbor who refused to forget a bracelet. The town reads it and feels the first prick of shame. People who once nodded now look sideways. Hendrik receives a notice from the Bar Association. Someone complained about irregular transfers. The lawyer's complacency is punctured by formality. Mek receives a letter summoning him to provide documentation he doesn't have. The Voss family friends thin out like leaves in autumn. The first public cracks widen into places others can see. Phone calls go unreturned. Invitations are politely declined. The village, which once rallied around their grief, now whispers about their greed. Sigrid stops going to church. Bram stops going to the pub. They become isolated by the very community they manipulated. Sunlight is rude. It shows what shadows were built to hide. Hendrik loses a client when the Bar Association suspends him pending investigation. The government demands repayment of the compensation funds. The buyers at the auction are contacted to reverse sales. Some comply with angry phone calls, some do not. Bram is served with a notice in front of the village cafe and staggers as if struck. Sigrid returns to the sycamore where she once staged grief and finds a small crowd she cannot charm. Mek's fiancé leaves when she realizes the scandal is not a rumor, but a reality that will follow her. The public downfall is not violent, it is procedural, quiet, devastating. The things they built on my absence are returned to chaos. The ranch is placed in legal receivership. The accounts are audited, every transaction is examined, and slowly, painfully, the truth emerges like a body rising from deep water. They declared me dead. They stole my life, and now they are paying the price. When a house's foundations rot, every floor collapses politely but completely. They come to me first Bram, fingers trembling over words, then Sigrid, who says, "We were so afraid." They bring apologies like coins thrown toward a well. Mek begs and offers to help rebuild the barn as if hammering could mend what was stolen. They ask for forgiveness because they need it to live, because their world has collapsed and they are looking for someone to pull them from the rubble. But the law has already done its work. The bank settled, compensation reclaimed, and the ranch's title quietly, legally placed back into a form that recognizes me. The villagers who once cheered are silent now. Hendrik's license is suspended. Mek's finances are tied up in restitution. They have nothing to bargain with except contrition. When they kneel, I feel a weight lift from my chest that is not triumph but a relief as ancient and plain as weather. Forgiveness is a choice I may one day grant privately, but the story I tell now is not about vengeance. It is about the steady, inevitable reckoning that happens when arrogance is tracked by human memory and administrative inches. I look at Sigrid's tear-streaked face, at Bram's shaking hands, at Mek's hollow eyes. They wanted my death to be convenient. Instead, my life became their reckoning. I tell them I need time. I tell them the land will decide before I do. I tell them to leave. Forgiveness is a door you open on your own terms, after the locks have been changed. You might be thinking this is a story about evidence and paperwork, but at its core it's about dignity. If a family, a boss, a partner, or a system decided you didn't matter, if they rewrote your life without your consent, know this. Time remembers what they thought they erased. The world is full of small witnesses, neighbors, clerks, veterinarians, baristas, whose casual attention can become your quiet evidence. You do not need a camera to be seen. You need people who remember truth and a patience that outlives their certainty. They proved my death with someone else's embers. Life is harder to prove, and so is justice. Quiet strength is not the absence of rage, it is the discipline of using wounds as tools. If this story moved you, tell me where you're watching from and one small witness in your own life who helped you keep truth. Share this with someone who needs to know that slow justice is still justice.